Hello, welcome to Nrwl Live, or Nrwl Connect Live. Who knows what we call it these days? But we're here with Gleb Bahmutov and my colleague Victor Safkin. Do you two want to say hello?
Hello.
Well, hello guys, and hello everyone.
We're really excited that Gleb's joining us today. We're going to be talking about Cypress, something near and dear to his heart, and something that Victor and myself have, as of this year, last year, started becoming big fans of. And so we're going to talk about all the ins and outs, get some people's questions answered. Lots of good questions were submitted ahead of time. Please feel free to submit more questions in the chat. We'll be watching that. So if something pops in your mind as we go, then we'll do our best to bring that up and discuss it while we're live here. But other than that, please enjoy. And Victor, I'll hand it off to you. I know you wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping things.
All right. Yeah, let me do that. So that should have been this slide. Jeff and I used to be on the Angular team for many years. And 2.5 years ago, we left the Angular team to start Nrwl, which is a consulting company where we help large companies do Angular right and in general do front-end development well. And we do it in a couple of ways. We help them use modern tools, for example, Cypress, or tools like Nest, for example. And we also help them adopt dev practices that are pioneered at Google. For instance, the monorepo stuff or the emphasis on tooling, code generation, and stuff like that. So we were doing it for some time, for like say a year before we decided to formalize it, right? And we built Nrwl, which is a set of Angular CLI power-ups for to make modern development easier, right? And Nrwl helps you use modern tools, for example, Cypress, build full stack applications in the same repo, so you can build the backend and the front end side by side, share code, stuff like that, and use best practices pioneered at Google, for example, the monorepo dev approaches. So one of the things we did very recently, I think last week when we released 7.6 and next 7.6, we switched our end-to-end test run as the default one from Protractor to Cypress. You could use Cypress for a while in the next repo, but since last week it will be the default, and that just shows how much we like Cypress, and we think it's a fantastic tool for the majority of projects. If it doesn't work for you, you can always go back and use Protractor. That's fine. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to Gleb today, because we believe in Cypress. All our internal stuff is tested with Cypress. We recommend Cypress to a lot of our clients. Nrwl clearly supports Cypress. So it would be interesting to talk why it's a fantastic tool and what are the drawbacks. Next is after you helping a lot of clients use Nrwl and Angular CLI and design those interesting dev workflows, we sort of saw that adding more power to Nrwl is not what would help the majority of our clients. Nrwl is already a mighty toolkit. The Angular CLI is already fantastic. It does a lot of stuff really well. So we thought that what can help the most is making all of this stuff more accessible. And Angular Contour is the result of this. It's a UI for the Angular CLI that comes as a standalone app or as a VS Code plugin. Right? You should probably use it as a VS Code plugin. It allows you to access the capabilities of the CLI and the capabilities of Nrwl in a sort of more intuitive way. It's meant for professionals because as professionals we know when to use the terminal, when to use the UI. It's a good place for both, but also can help folks who are new to the CLI, because you can explore a few things in a more interactive way rather than hitting the terminal with a bunch of commands that do not really work. Finally, we have a product called Nrwl Connect, and it's our developer empowerment platform. Essentially, we at Nrwl, we are a small company, and we work with very large companies. So we're trying to scale the way we work, because we don't want to hire 5,000 people and just scale through that, right? We want to make sure that we can provide a lot of value with sort of very few people. And Connect is one way to do it. It allows our clients to register in this platform, access premium content that we provide, video courses on how to build front-end apps, how to build like Google, on how to build good Angular apps. It also allows our clients to ask us questions in a very sort of interactive way. They can develop something in VS Code. if they hit a problem that they cannot understand, or they just cannot figure out, and there are problems like that, they can pop up a plugin, a VS Code plugin, ask a question right there, and one of our experts will receive this question with all the stuff that the client was trying to do. For example, the commands they're trying to run, the logs, the errors, the changes they're trying to make, and hopefully that gives our expert a lot more information about what the problem might be, so the expert can provide like a reasonable answer without going back and forth for days. So we're trying to basically implement a very good support workflow that goes way beyond anything else other companies provide in this space. Currently, it's only available for a few existing clients that we have. It's still in private beta, but soon, very soon, it should become available publicly. So you should be able to sign up online, and use this wonderful tool in your team or even personally.
All right, cool. Thank you, Victor. So yeah, like as Victor said, we've started relying more on Cypress, soon going to be the default end-to-end test runner in Protractor. And the only way we could get Gleb to talk to us about it and give us information was if we did this live event, so everyone could hear about all the amazing things that Cypress does. Actually, that's not true. I'm sure Gleb would have done a private call, but when we do calls, like when we talk to other people working on cool things, we like to get the most mileage out of it, share it with other people, and have a fun time. So Gleb, thank you for joining. Maybe we could start. A lot of people tuning in may not have much context of what Cypress is. Maybe they haven't played with it yet. Could you maybe talk about what it is and how it started?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for inviting me. I think, first of all, invitation itself is a great honor, and second of all, you invited me after you've done the heavy lifting. You actually implemented, Cypress setup in your NX CLI, so I don't have to do it. So that's the best invitation. You've done everything and just invite me to a party. So Cypress is an end-to-end test runner, completely free, completely open source, MIT license, unlimited in its features. There is no Cypress free or Cypress premium. It's just you get everything. You can install it yourself. You can download its Electron app. You can install it with npm install Cypress, or you can install it through CLI to configure it with all the bells and whistles like you've done. And then you can run it yourself. And when you run it, it's Electron app, so it pops a GUI. And so when you run your end-to-end test, you actually see all the commands from your test, and it uses Mocha syntax, but every command like site visit that opens a website has actual button there. And then your application is iframe. So if you've never seen Cypress, I recommend just going to our website, looking at the little, do we say GIF or GIF, right? What's the consensus? I don't know.
Right?
GIF. Well, yes. But we don't call you Geff, we call you Jeff. So.
Some people do.
Okay.
My kids do.
Back to the test runner. So it runs your test, and you see every command, and you see your application, and you see your application being controlled from the test commands. And if you want to see what happened at each step, you can just click on a command and get, first of all, you get the view of your app, how it looked at that particular moment, because we have time traveling debugger built in. So you can see how your app looked at a particular step in your test. And then you can also open DevTools, and for each command, if you click on it, you get more information. Like if you use like scikit to find an element by selector, it will actually highlight the element that it found. So you know if you're actually working with the right element, if you clicked on the right button, or maybe you found a button by text and it's a completely different button.
Mm-hmm.
So all the nice things for end-to-end testing are built in. Everything is included. You can install additional modules, but to start, 99% should be there. And I think people like it.
Cool. Well, one thing that's interesting, so myself and Victor are fans of UIs. Like, we think they can introduce powerful paradigms, but developers can be somewhat, I don't know, cynical towards UIs, or have some notions. Did you get pushback on having UI being a big component of Cypress's developer experience?
Well, if I gotten any pushback, I'm not talking to those people anymore, right? No. So you have to have, I guess, UI where appropriate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about like NXCLI. It's terminal, right? That's where you can like select an option and quickly configure a project. It makes sense to run it from a terminal through terminal interface. At the same time, your website or your web application runs in a browser. So of course you need a UI next to your app that shows what happens when you're actually testing your app, right? So, having just terminal output would not make sense for testing the application that runs in the browser. So, a GUI is a great part of the whole experience, and it's so useful. Like, it's like, can you move DevTools from the browser into terminal? Yeah, you could, but like, why would you?
Yeah, cool. So how did it come about? What was the first project that Cypress was used? I mean, most tools come out of some kind of pain or scratching some itch. What was the main itch that caused Cypress to happen?
So I've been with Cypress for almost 2 years, and before I joined Cypress, I was a happy user of Cypress for a year. And Cypress actually appeared a year earlier, and it was created by a great developer, Brian Mann, who still runs the company, who still programs like, well, not 20 hours a day, but, reasonably, let's say 10 hours a day, working on Cypress day to day. And Brian Mann was a Rails developer who used Backbone for UI testing. And, as every great developer, at some point in his life, is trying to create online tutorial that he can charge for. Brian wrote, a Rails tutorial and Backbone tutorial. And one part where he had difficulty was to explain how to test the application. And he was looking around, and at some point, I think it was at GSConf US, where he had this idea, what if I actually run my end-to-end test right next to my code, right? Imagine I create my website, and then right next to it, I'll have my test code, test commands, and the test commands will just send events to my web application. And so he had that idea, and he started prototyping it, and he actually wrote this great tool, Cypress, and at that point, Electron appeared, so it kind of made sense. And then he had to solve a bunch of technical, problems, like how can two iframes talk to each other if one iframe comes from localhost, that's your spec, and another iframe comes from, let's say, google.com, right? Because usually iframes have this boundary. So he figured out, all these answers, and Cypress was born. So it was like literally trying to write a chapter in a tutorial, how to test applications, and not being happy about the tools that you have at that moment. We all have to scratch our own itch, right?
Yeah, that's right. So you touched on it a little bit. So I guess the dominant player in this space that most end-to-end test tools are based on is Selenium or WebDriver. This kind of completely separated protocol for sending commands to the browser, getting data back from the browser. Tools like Protractor are built on it. So this decision to run in the same environment as your tests, or to be running in the same window, what went into that decision, or what were some of the constraints and things that led to deciding that this is a good way to do end-to-end?
I think, and just don't get me wrong, every tool is building on the state of the art when it was created, and especially it was targeted for testing the websites that existed at that moment. Selenium has been around for a while, and WebDriver has been around for a while, and in fact they reached actual standards, right? Label, which is a great achievement for WebDriver team, right? Every browser vendor will implement the standard and will keep supporting it. So Selenium is not going anywhere. It will always be around and will always be capable of testing websites. But at that moment, let's say around, I think 10 years ago, most of the websites were static. That means if you load it, it's not going to change. So if you execute a command, load a website, and the browser loads it, and when you execute a command, find a button, and when you execute a command, click on a button, the button is not going anywhere. It's not suddenly going to be disabled, right? Or completely hidden, or become detached from the DOM, because the site is static. So for WebDriver, sending commands from outside the browser to the browser, doing HTTP calls makes perfect sense. And you can do everything. All the native events are supported. You can upload files, download files. And at the same time, the modern apps started evolving, right? Ajax appeared at Gmail, well, from Microsoft Word. And all of a sudden, the websites became dynamic. And all of a sudden, the button that was there when a page loaded and you found it could move or disappear or become temporarily disabled. And so if you send a command and then you send another command, there's no guarantee that by the time the second click command arrives, the button is going to be ready or not ready yet. And so that was a real problem. And I think that leads to tests being flaky, because for some temporary hiccup, the application disables the button. And so the modern testing tool has to account for that. And Cypress, by running in the same event loop, can actually guarantee that. We can check, because tests run in the same event loop. We can check the DOM. Is the button there? Can we click it? Is it not disabled? Is it not covered by anything else? And because we run in the same event loop, that means your app code is actually paused. And it's a huge thing. Being able to check the button and send synchronously an event to it without letting your app actually do something quickly in between is a huge, huge source of tests just running the way you expect them. But right now Cypress doesn't have native events, for example, so it's only synthetic events. So there are huge technical limitations.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask about that actually. So you're talking about the support that the WebDriver protocol makes available to the clients using it. What are some examples of things that are really hard to do without that support, or like doing something in the browser with Cypress where it's at now? And maybe you could also talk about things in progress to add more capabilities to do the same kind of tests.
So right now, our biggest limitation is lack of cross-browser support. We are limited to Chrome browsers. So we ship Electron browser with Cypress because it's built into Electron. It's approximately, I think, it's like Chrome 59 or 63. I forgot which one. It's a little bit behind. We'll update it soon. We can also start the test and load Chrome your test in a Chrome that is already installed, or Chrome Canary, one of those, but is installed on your system. But we cannot load your test, for example, in Firefox or Internet Explorer or even IE Edge yet. So we're working on adding cross-browser support, and we've done a lot of work trying to get Firefox to work. And we looked at all the hacks we had to do to get Firefox and to be able to control it. Because when we start Chrome, there's so many automation flags to be able to actually, point back at ourselves as being the proxy. Put it in a special automation mode, load our code into the browser. We've done it all for Firefox, and it's just being, a code nightmare. And we looked around and it's like, if we release it now, then forever we'll have to maintain it, and it's just going to be really, really hard moving forward. One of the things that I have to fight every day is not write the code at the edge of my mental capacity, right? Otherwise, I'll come back a week later and it will be absolute disaster. So the code has to be maintainable. And we looked at IE, and we want to support IE 11. And we looked at can we restructure our code in order for us to control IE 11? And we arrived to a conclusion that we have to restructure our code so that in cross-browser mode, we'll have to use different mechanisms to actually deliver events to actual elements. So, for example, in Chrome, we're going to switch and support native events using debugger protocol. In Firefox, there is something called actions. So we'll be able to send native events using actions. Even though we leave majority of logic the same. Before we click on a button, we check if a button is there, if it's visible, not covered by another element, if it's not disabled, So we do the same thing, but then we send the event using some native protocol. In A11, we're going to use WebDriver, right? So again, leave majority of our logic in place, but then for the last step, use WebDriver native event. So as you can see, in order for us to add cross-browser, and we're working on that, we have to get native events working. So that's our #1 priority: get native event. Can we do hover? Can we do support tab, right? Event. Can we upload, download files? They all require actual native events, and that's #2 thing people complain about, right? Aside from cross-browser, is I cannot upload a file. I was well, you can stub in JavaScript, that little method, but it's not the same.
And for the record, there are lots of cases with WebDriver that are pretty tough to do regarding file uploading. So it may be possible, but not necessarily fun. Which actually is a good segue to one of the things that we've heard from our own team, as we started experimenting with Cypress last year sometime and using it for clients, is that we were actually realizing it's kind of enjoyable. There's not a whole lot we have to figure out in order to write good Cypress tests.
Yeah,
it's a fun experience. Victor, I'll let Victor talk about it a little bit more, since he actually writes code a lot more than I do.
Right, so we started using it a lot for Angular console, which is our UI, because it's a piece, right? And I remembered how hard it was to test. And Angular console is a UI that has interesting other completions, and animations going all sorts of directions, right? So it does a lot of stuff that I wouldn't say advanced, right? But it's not a typical enterprise app. Screen shows up, disappears. It actually does interesting UI stuff. And testing things even other completion in Protractor or using Protractor is challenging when it doesn't work, right? It can take you, I don't know, hours to figure out why it doesn't work, right? And the experience was very different with Cypress because of the interactivity. You can click around, you can I see this value is missing or whatever, right? Or the HTTP request replied with the response object that doesn't match my schema or whatever, stuff like that, right? It was surprisingly easy to figure it out. And I slowly over time, we sort of killed most of our unit tests for components because testing components that do a lot of animations and stuff, using unit tests, it's kind of a lie because you don't actually get many guarantees about the components working, right? You feel good about yourself. So it becomes one of those exercises where it makes you feel good but doesn't provide any value. Where here, I actually kind of trust my application working after, testing it in that fashion, right? Where we actually go in the browser, actually click on buttons, actually see animations doing what it's supposed to be doing. And at this point, for internal stuff, right, we basically do not write component tests anymore, right? Unit tests for components, right? We only use Cypress specs. Either you test the whole application or you build some sort of playground and just have a component you interact with, but you still interact with it using Cypress. And when I talk about it with our clients, I usually say you can write 5,000 unit tests for your components and let's 100 Protractor tests, right? Or you can write 1,000 unit tests for your services and stuff, right? And 300 Cypress specs, and the coverage would be better in the latter case. You actually would catch more errors, right? Your experience would actually be better. So I kind of no longer use component tests, right? Because I feel there were always a little bit of a lie in terms of how much guarantees they provide, right? But you used to write them because you that was one option. The other option was, okay, now I have to deal with Protractor, and it's just so much more challenging to write all the specs there that you accept the lie and just say that's fine, it's good enough, right? Whereas now, because the trade-off is slightly different, I was I no longer have to do that anymore, right? I can just rely on more end-to-end tests or whatever, the Cypress tests. They don't have to be truly end-to-end, right? To test my UI, and it just feels a lot better in terms of dev experience, where you can run them in the background. You always see what's going on with your application. You keep developing stuff. Once in a while, you see it fail. You're I wonder what that, right? You click around, you sort of figure it out. You don't have to go through this ng-serve experience where you ng-serve your app, you make a change, you refresh it, you restart the whole, you redo the state, then oh, I see, make another change, you refresh it, right? So it does all of this for you. So like I became a fan very quickly. Like after I fixed, like, oh Jesus Christ, that's fantastic, right? So and the way we did it is we had like an ad hoc setup on top of the NX repo, which was on the side. And like, okay, this ad hoc setup is not hard, but it's hard for me to imagine a lot of clients just magically re-implementing it. It requires some understanding of how TypeScript works, how watch for things and stuff like that, right? So we and that triggered our work on adding Cypress to Angular CLI via NX, right? And Ben, who is a Nrwlian, he did all the work, or the majority of the work, and in like 2 weeks we had it working, right? And the experience got like so much better very quickly.
So I have to say, Victor, you look happy. You look healthy. I think you look 10 years younger than you look before.
yeah, that's what Cypress does to you, right? It's the source of youth.
I have to say, but testing, like, despite whatever, like, it has tremendous value, but it's pure overhead, right? When you're writing an application, when you're coding it, the feature delivery, that's what matters. Everything else is overhead. So testing, the better, you can do your testing, the quicker, the faster, it's completely a win-win-win. You cannot have bad tools.
No, I agree. And I think that if you, for things like testing, like let's say the complex business logic or some sort of like a service in an Angular sense, right? Then you can say maybe unit testing helps me to figure out the coupling, like, okay, if I inject many things, there is a design feedback that I'm receiving. Whereas with components, at least in the Angular world, components are the place where everything comes together, okay?
Yeah.
They are coupled to stuff, okay? So it's very hard to see like a beautiful component that injects a single thing, right? Or these days it injects a store, like in the GRX store, which is, again, you're coupling yourself to quite a few things right there, right? So I feel like the design feedback there, at least for me, is absent, right? So I don't get that from a unit test. So the only thing I'm trying to get is correctness, right? Or make sure that things are like running correctly. And I think that through end-to-end tests, so tested at a high level, actually gives me more guarantees that UI is correct, right? That animations run correctly, that things actually move somewhere, and the button is actually shown, right, in a few milliseconds or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah. Victor, can I ask? So you usually run your tests, or you work on your testing and your code in like watch mode, right? So you keep your modifying the code, and Cypress just picks up the changes, and NX CLI actually installs the watching mode for you.
Yeah. So the CLI does the well, basically we look at what folks do for Protractor, what the default builder for Protractor does, and we kind of did something similar, right? So we weren't like reinventing the world or whatever, right? It's just it works in a very transparent way, right? So if you are an Angular developer and you run ng end-to-end, like ng end-to-end my app dash end-to-end, right? You would run the same command. It's just instead of Protractor, you would see Cypress show up, right? So like for you as a developer, in terms of what commands you need to run, you run the same stuff, right? You just decided to use a different provider to deliver the same functionality, right?
Right. You're not afraid that NG core team will go and add Cypress to their.
That would be great. So if they do it, we can just use it, right? For us, at the end of the day, we don't make money by having a Cypress builder in NX, right? NX is free open source. We don't make money from it directly anyhow, right?
Yeah. So NX is like the dog fooder of a lot of new Angular CLI stuff, or like the breeding ground for new ideas or test ground. So if things ever make it into CLI, like we pioneered a lot of the multi-project setup and helped identify some rough edges, which is now natively supported. So yeah, we collaborate pretty closely. We're happy for them to take whatever they'd like, because then we don't have to maintain it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's like if someone else maintains it, that's better, right? So like I want to provide a good dev experience to users, to our clients, and to Angular users in general, right? And if someone else implements a good experience, that's better than us trying to maintain the good experience, right? So if they do it, that's fantastic, right? So we would just use their builder instead, right? That's fine.
I see. And I wanted to ask you some other question, and I completely forgot, but
it was probably a good one.
It was the best one.
Well, we've still got some time, and actually we've got some questions that folks have submitted ahead of time, and some people are also asking some good questions live. A lot of people asked about browser support. We talked about it a little bit. Where does it rank in terms of priorities against other things you're doing with Cypress right now, cross-browser support?
Very, very high. It's probably the most important thing in terms for us to like move the needle. I mean, we don't make money of a test runner. For us, the test runner is something we give away. But of course, if we had cross-browser support, we'd have 10 times number of users out there in the wild. I actually like. If I understand correctly, the CLI tool can install both Cypress and Protractor, so you can write most of your tests with Cypress.
Yeah, that's actually. Yeah, I want to quickly mention that because again, Cypress for us and for all of our clients is a replacement for UI tests, period, right? So if you want to have a cross-browser test suite, right, usually it's a much smaller one, right? Let's say you discovered an issue, you actually want to have a test, make sure that issue doesn't reoccur, or you have like a few smoke tests, so you go to screens and make sure that things load, so polyfills applied correctly, right? You would have, like by default, we have your application and your end-to-end test sort of, which is side by side, so it's like one-to-one. But you can have as many end-to-end projects as you want that test your application. So you can have a Cypress one that has, let's say, 300 specs that test your application in all sorts of ways, right? Go through all the screens in detail. And I have another test suite for Protractor that has like 20 specs. And it works. I think that's actually a good combination where the majority of functionality you test has nothing to do with the browser, with some specific functionality of Chrome or whatever, right? It's you click on the button, thing showed up, you click on the button, it went away, right? So like I wouldn't necessarily run that test against like IE or Firefox because chances are it's going to work, right? If we discover it doesn't, add a Protractor spec in that second project, right? And it should work fine.
I have to say that despite what people think about IE 11 or some other browsers, I bet that browser still works out of the box much better than the code I write, like, initially at least, right? So there are more bugs in my code, at least for the first month, than I can blame on IE or anything else. Docker bugs.
I mean, I grew up with IE6 being the terrible browser to support, and so like when people complain about IE11, it's just like you don't know how good you have it with IE11 being the only thing you have to think about. But we had some interesting things back then. All right, that's great. I'm sure a lot of people were happy to hear that. One other common question was in terms of migrating from something WebDriver based or Protractor, if somebody had a mature suite of many tests and wanted to move over, is there any kind of strategy or tooling that makes that easy, or is it an artisanal process, one by one, determining the right way? Or should they even be thinking about it as a one-to-one translation?
We should. I don't know. Well, first of all, there is no like magical tool that would convert. There is no code mod or anything like that. So I would actually not rewrite. I would maybe keep adding new tests in Cypress and leave the rest, existing tests there. And as you get more experience with Cypress, right, then maybe you'll notice, I can easily rewrite this particular important test in Cypress like right away, and it will give me a lot of value because we keep like iterating on this particular feature right now. So it'd be nice to have a test that like is modern and explains itself. So I would not rewrite. As you know, like rewriting software is like almost like declaring bankruptcy. You're like no matter what you say, you will throw away most of your code. So I would not rewrite tests. I would add new tests using Cypress.
Cool. One thing we didn't really talk about much, and a couple of the questions were about is how fast is it, or how have you benchmarked tests running Cypress, like in a CI process? If you've got similar coverage between this and a WebDriver suite, do you have any kind of indications of what kind of performance improvements could be expected?
So I know to do MVC team has moved the Selenium tests to Cypress. And I worked on that a little bit, and it's hard to do apples to apples comparisons. Because first of all, even like you do to the MVC and you have both sets of tests, it's not a realistic app. That's one thing. Cypress runs in a browser, so it is observing, your commands, assertions. So it immediately goes to the next command as soon as command passes successfully. So you can see how fast it is for yourself. On the other hand, Cypress, because it runs in a browser, allows you to kind of switch your mental thinking and move away from the slow parts of end-to-end tests. And what's the slow part? Let's say every test that you start has to log in. So yes, you can open the login screen, type username and password, click login, and wait a second or two while you log in. And then you can actually start testing. So with Cypress, you have direct access to your JavaScript, to the network. So you can, for example, if you have third-party login, you can log in by making a HTTP request directly from your test. And that's what makes the test fast. Not, fiddling with like how fast a click happens. Is it 200 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds? The fact that you can actually log in immediately for all the tests that are not testing the login screen itself, that's what makes the test fast. The fact that you can, for example, expose, let's say, your, NGRX data store and control it from your test. And if you have a complicated setup, before you can actually test with feature X, you can set up in a single JavaScript call, and it's there, and then you can actually start testing and not go through UI to build up your state. That's the fast part, right? So even like rewriting things that always went into the MVC through page, from the page, for the DOM, for those tests, cuts like half of the time right away. And for more complex scenarios, that's where you have real time savings, because you can directly control your app, directly bypass the slow parts, stop slow network requests, and use fixtures. Those are the fast things. So it depends. It depends on the application.
Cool. One question, which I also was kind of wondering. So there's screenshot support with Cypress, right, where it'll capture like the DOM screenshot. Do you have any kind of diffing support, or is that on the roadmap of screenshot diffing?
So we've been talking about functional testing, right? Find a button, click on it, make sure the text appears. So it's functional. The fact that text is kind of broken, the layout is all like messed up, or it's covered by some other weird color that you don't want to be, that is not functional. You can test, properties, but it's not really meant for what kind of testing. If you go to Cypress documentation, we have a page with plugins. And people have written plugins for all sorts of things because it's just JavaScript. And there are like at least 6 plugins for screenshot diffing. You can use your own tools and do screenshot diffing yourself from Cypress through a plugin, or you can use commercial third-party services like Percy.io, Applet tools. They wrote plugins that do very interesting things for image diffing. So they have this trick. So Cypress runs in Chrome or Electron only. Those services, when you take a snapshot and you say expect to match snapshot, they take the DOM and all the styles, they send it to their server farm. That server farm loads the DOM and styles in a bunch of different browsers on different operating systems, on different browsers, in different resolutions, and then takes screenshots and compares to previous master screenshots. So you get for kind of cross-browser workaround. You get different resolution support and different operating systems. And those screenshot services are really, really good. So you don't have to use us. That's not our core strength. But you can bring your own image diffing service, and Cypress just works with it.
Cool. Yeah, actually, that brings up a good question about the extensibility model of Cypress. Could you touch on that a bit?
So Cypress is written in something that gives us, copyright protection naturally. It's written in CoffeeScript. So just because it was written 4 years ago when ES6 was not even there, so CoffeeScript was a great language. We are rewriting Cypress itself in TypeScript right now, but it's just JavaScript. Even without looking at the core of a project, you can run your own code in the browser, that's where your tests run, and in Node. And you have a bridge where through side tasks that you can communicate. And you can also write a plugin that changes the default behavior of Cypress itself. And you can do then everything. So I've been able, for example, write user space theming support. I mean, it's just browser. From your spec, you can load a different theme and have like Halloween, right? Or some dark theme. And it's kind of nice because when you have a failing test, it actually like loads MP3 and laughs at you. Like, why not? People have been able to write just like expect something to match snapshot. And that would be image or object snapshot. And the cool thing, why it's better than original idea from Jess, is that when you actually have a mismatch snapshot, there is a button because Cypress has a GUI. A button appears and it says there is a difference. Here's the difference. You click on it and it shows you a nice editor, almost like GitHub div, and you can see where the big objects are different. And you can say approve or not approve, all visually. Mm-hmm. Like unbelievable, and it's completely user space because you can do whatever you want. It's nice that we've been able to achieve so much by keeping the core focused. And there was another question that I've seen is like how much we can give access to the core like Mocha engine, because Cypress runs on Mocha test runner engine. So all the tests and before and after hooks are all controlled by Mocha. And you cannot extend it yourself. It's not easy. People want to, for example, run a single test or do like a grep or something like this, or do retries using Mocha features. We forked Mocha a long time ago because we had to fix things. And now Mocha kind of caught up, and now it's a little bit ahead of us. So some parts are hard to reach, but not impossible. But majority of user things are actually doable.
Cool. All right, there were a couple questions that came in that were sort of best practices related. Like one is, let's see, data. So like there are lots of opinions about how to interact with real systems as part of your end-to-end tests. Should be as close to your production environment as possible. Is there any kind of emergent best practices in Cypress? Is it different in that way or what would you say is the prevailing best practice of the database and network interactivity to get data inside of applications and mocking?
I encourage everyone who has questions like that, right? What's the best practice for dealing with elements, for like setting up your database and so on? Just look at our docs. We've been investing 25% of our developer time. Like all of us, like every developer is writing and updating documentation. Like I do it every day. So we have a lot of answers to questions like those. So let's say, for example, database. How do you actually set up a database before each test? First of all, you should do it before the test. Do not try to clean up the data after the test because you could crash and then you leave like everything, right? So every task has to prepare everything that it needs beforehand. Don't try to set up a data once, log in once, and then every test kind of goes, because something could go wrong, right? And the test would not finish correctly. So every test could be independent from other tests. Assume that a bunch of test files are running in parallel. And this is important not when you run locally, but when you run on CI. So Cypress has Cypress Open, where you see the test runner, or the headless mode, Cypress Run. That's what you use on your CI, and it should work right out of the box. In that case, assume that multiple CI machines are all running specs in parallel so that they can actually finish faster. And so in that case, you have to use separate databases. So we suggest that you bring Docker container with a database for each CI machine so that CI has its own set of data so that they don't conflict, right? Don't try to kind of orchestrate and say, I'll create one user beforehand, and then everyone will use that user to do their testing. So we suggest all those things. And another thing is the network control. So Cypress gives you an ability to spy or stub network requests. That doesn't mean you have to do it. Maybe at first start, if you don't have backend yet, maybe you haven't written it, maybe use just stubs. And then all your unit tests or end-to-end tests will actually go to the stub and not actually go to the backend. And then you write your backend and then like remove the network stubs and then actually do full end-to-end test that goes to the backend, comes back, and you still spine those requests to make sure they actually happen the way you think they should happen. But you don't have to, right? It's up to you. You have to choose what do you want to do. Do you want to always have backend or not? Maybe some backend calls are way too long. Let's say you have a call to payment system or some kind of authentication system, but just you don't control, right? Takes too long, requires extra resources. Stop those things if you need to. We give you full power, but it's great responsibility, I hear.
Yeah, and interacting with payment systems are just going to rack up your credit card bill, because you got to send that credit card data every time, right? If you're really testing it. Anyway.
It's a real test.
That's how I lost my first million. So a little bit of a lower level question, but it's come up a couple times on the live questions, is the shadow DOM. People, I think with Angular, some people are using native shadow DOM with components and are having issues with it. I'm not sure exactly which issues. Maybe they're trying to select deeply in the shadow DOM, or
yeah, that's what happens. Yeah.
Okay.
So every time you have a problem with Cypress, and which is not like something you can look up in our documentation, or we have a Gitter, chat where we answer questions, and other users answer questions. If you actually have a problem with Cypress, we encourage you to open a GitHub issue. We have a small number of 1,000 open issues, which is, regular. So Shadow DOM has been an open question for a while, and the problem is that we use like jQuery to traverse things, to find elements, to select them. And when you hit the shadow root, now you have to have separate logic to traverse deeper there. And whenever you have a small team, and we are very small, right, 18 people, we have to pick our battles. And we have to kind of wait, like, what's the feature we should be working on, even if we can do several things in parallel, but we'll actually answer most of the questions. And unfortunately, the shadow DOM, we don't think it's used enough. And we look at like number of like comments and reactions. Compared to our technical limits that we have right now, I don't think the shadow DOM score is high enough for us to actually do it right now. Now, we do encourage people to, maybe come up with plugins. Like we don't have XPath support natively. We use jQuery selectors. So I wrote a Cypress XPath plugin. So maybe someone can write, shadow DOM plugin that could provide some solution temporarily, and then other people could improve it. So I encourage people with shadow DOM questions to see if they can write a plugin for this, for selecting elements.
Cool. So we had some more testing best practices questions. Parallelization. Running in parallel. How's that work with Cypress?
Excellent question. So here's how we make money. We don't charge for test runner. Instead, we have a SaaS component.
You charge for parallelization? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
The second you run it in another process, you write a check to Cypress. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. But here's a complete story. So we have a dashboard. Cypress can record video of your test run, screenshots on failure, test results, and you can output it in a variety of report formats. It's all built in. You can store it on your CI. As you can probably tell, not every CI shows those artifacts well enough. So you can quickly debug the problem. So here's how we make money. If you have private artifacts, you can just upload all of them from your CI to our dashboard. And then you're paying, for artifact storage, for storing video, screenshots, and so on. And another thing, if you pay for the dashboard, you get automatic load balancing of your tests. So when you run in your CI across several machines, we can all tell each machine what to run so they all finish faster. And it saves a lot of time, from our experience and our user experience. Now, you can mimic the same thing yourself, right? We are not limiting Cypress in any way. If you know you have 10 spec files, you can convert it to a GitLab or Jenkins or Travis. And we show examples of that ourselves. And I've written tools that are open source for GitLab, for example, other people have written for Circle, where you can actually do it yourself and use your own CI parallelization by just maintaining and updating that CI file. It's just, with us, it's easier, right? And that's how we make money. We just make parallelization simple to add, but you can do it yourself. We soon will release an open source plan that will actually include all the features of a dashboard for public projects as well. So if you're maintaining an open source library, stay tuned, and soon you'll have all the features without paying anything. But if you're private enterprise, it makes sense to pay for the dashboard.
So to reiterate, so the people actually running the tests, they run it in their own environments, but it is connected to the dashboard, which publishes the artifacts of the dashboard. It also helps manage the parallelization of tests to optimize it to run it as fast as possible.
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of questions got answered just with that there too. Like people wondering, okay, if I want to run it myself, what am I missing that Cypress is holding back? But it's really just some more intelligence and a better way of analyzing your results, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. I'm looking through some of the questions here. I mean, there were a lot of them, but like looking at them, a lot of them were already answered. So now I'm having to actually parse a little bit more to see. Victor, do you have any more that were on your mind? We've only got a few minutes left, but wanted to squeeze as much.
I think the coverage is good. I think we talked about, I wanted to talk about the dashboard, but because I think the dashboard is a nice add-on, right, where it just gives you a nice experience as a developer. But we covered that. So yeah, I don't have any questions.
People, sorry, go ahead, Gleb.
No, there was one question that I kind of piqued my interest. There was the question, how can you use accessibility testing with Axe library?
Yeah, that was one that came up.
So a person who used to work with us, Nrwl, he actually has written a Cypress plugin called Cypress Axe, where you can test for accessibility from Cypress tests using that library. So if you need accessibility testing, we can do it for a plugin. And in fact, we want to alleviate developers and QAs from doing this manual clicking and pointing. We want this to happen automatically as fast as possible. And for developers and especially for QAs to move to more higher order testing, like security testing, performance, accessibility, right? Even testing the design of an app or visual design, right? Rather than this functional testing that should be automated by now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there are so many things that can just be done automatically. Accessibility is a lot of it is just checking things are done the right way. It's got the right roles, the right can be parsed by screen readers and that sort of thing. And then there are the human side of it is making sure things in context are done the right way, things that tools can't pick up. So it's great to let machines do what they're good at doing and leave the interesting stuff for humans.
Exactly.
So folks want a couple questions. So folks, to get started with Cypress, one, where's the best place to start? Two, to know how to extend Cypress, what's the best way to find everything that's out there to extend it? Since that's the model, is it's a simple core with a powerful extension community.
So the easiest one is to go to our website, cypress.io. The easiest way to start is, aside
tweet at
from
Gleb and ask him how to do it.
No, aside from NX, tool, if you don't have NX,
oh yeah, good plug for NX. Yeah, use NX.
To do npm install Cypress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, forgot about that, right? No, so it's npm module. So npm install Cypress will install it, and it won't have all the bells and whistles like you configure. But if you just want to try, it's fine. And then go to our documentation site. So docs.cypress.io. We do work hard to actually make it as simple to read, as useful as possible, and just go from there. I think our docs is a great place to start. And as far as extending Cypress, Jeff, we include pretty much every library like Mocha, Chai, jQuery, Chai, Synon. So you don't have to install anything to actually write good tests for first month. But after that, you can bring all up NPM modules as well. But for now, you should be good to go after 5 minutes. And of course, ask us questions, tweet at us, tweet at Nrwl as well, questions related to NX. But
where can we find your favorite plugins? Could you tweet a list of Gleb's top picks of extensions for Cypress?
I will tweet. There are a couple. So, but plugins with snapshots is kind of nice. I like it a lot. I can snapshot, DOM or objects, and it just has.
That's the one you wrote, right?
No, it was third party. I wrote one, and I don't like it myself. Yes, but people write much better code than I do, but I do enjoy using other people's work. There is another one called Cypress Pipe, which is a really interesting plugin. In Cypress, there's this concept of retriability, and we have a whole page that explains it. But basically, the idea is this: if you're trying to find an element on a page, and then you say should be visible, like you attach an assertion, that command, get me this element with a selector, will be retried until the assertions that follow pass, all of them. So you can, get multiple ones. So let's say you're trying to say, get me to do items, there should be 10 of them. And this will just wait and try, get me to do items. Other 10 items, no. Get me elements, other 10, until your app actually maybe refreshes itself, right? And fetches and actually updates the DOM. So every command has this built-in retries based on its internal logic and assertions that you add. And to me, this is the core feature that makes the test runner actually intelligently kind of test your app, and you don't have to worry about it. To me, and then Cypress Pipe kind of adds it so you can write your own custom commands that have this retries built in. So Cypress Pipe is an interesting thing. We're thinking maybe to move it into the core, but we'll see.
Cool.
I will tweet my favorite.
Great. Yeah. So everybody look out for that. I don't know if this is a good idea to say, but the Angular console repo could be a good place for people wanting to look at some examples of Cypress. It may not be.
It is a place. But
you can at least see how it works.
Yeah, I think it's a good place because you can see how to do it with Angular and the Angular CLI via NX, where there is actually it works without much setup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can
be. So don't judge too harshly, but you can at least kind of see it working and play with it.
Yeah, exactly. It is there. Another place if you want to see how to do it with Angular, right? If you go to NX.dev, we have some guides on how to use Cypress, right? And at this point, because it's a default, you kind of sort of have to learn, have to use it, right? Unless you opt out. But you can see stuff over there. And
in what NX version is it the default? 7.7?
7.6. 7.6.
Oh, so it already is the default.
Yeah, it's out there. And both Cypress and for unit testing, we switched to Jest or Karma as well. So because we feel like the combination works better. Anyway, if you use 7.6, you should get it there.
Yeah, so check out nx.dev, the new home for NX, which is we're really excited about. Great, everything redone for NX, lots of great new docs. Victor went 2 weeks without sleep to pull that off.
Just authored a lot of docs.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But yeah, so we've got information there. It's now the default in NX. So, even just setting up a new NX workspace, creating an app, it's going to be the default option. You can still choose Protractor and also you can choose Karma instead of Jest, but the defaults are now that, which we've been using it for a while. We've seen lots of happiness from people using them, so we feel pretty good about that. And Gleb, any last words before we sign off?
No, but I want to thank you for adding Cypress Test Runner so that everyone can enjoy it, and thank you so much.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Gleb, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.